Ken, I want to welcome you to the frequency of Genius 360 interviews. And I think a lot of the listeners are familiar with your work, but for those that are not, can you give us a brief background in regard to yourself and your work?
Sure. What I do for a living is I teach people how to empower themselves and improve their health to whatever degree they're interested in naturally. That includes whether it's healing an incurable disease or just having more energy. So over the years, I've studied with people around the world who are adept at healing so-called incurable diseases, which actually there are no incurable diseases. And because I have an unusual background in engineering and medicine and other things, I started to see things in these approaches that various people taught me that they weren't seeing. And so I've kind of got a unique perspective on things. And because of my background in electrical engineering, I have developed some solutions for particularly some of the threats like electromagnetic pollution and chemtrails and nuclear fallout and that kind of stuff. That's kind of unusual. But very briefly, I really got started in this, so maybe I think in 2003 I started my business full time, but probably another 10 years before that, I was working in the medical system for about 23 years and had no clue whatsoever about health or natural health, and was really sick from birth, very hypoglycemic, had a lot of blood sugar issues and gland issues, and it manifested as mood swings and energy swings and caused a lot of problems in my life, nearly caused divorce a few times. And so in seeking the solutions for those problems, I wound up finding solutions and, of course, looked to the medical system because that's what I was working in, and found no solutions for degenerative illness there. And so then I turned my attention to natural methods and studied with people who are luminaries in the natural health world, like Gabriel Cousens or Hippocrates Health Institute or Brenda Cobb in Atlanta at the Living Foods Institute, and on, a whole slew of people. And so ultimately studied with them, learned their techniques, and kind of melded them all together. And combined with my unusual viewpoint from engineering and physics and chemistry, developed some kind of unusual solutions. But in general, the approach that I use is using living foods and detoxification, along with emotional healing and reprogramming of unconscious beliefs that are self-defeating or limiting, to heal disease or improve health to whatever degree a person desires.
Well, that is an excellent background and overview. I know that you're very passionate about many subjects, and I'm very intrigued by your website, Fresh and Alive, which to me is a great name. So I think where we'll start is basically, let's go over what you consider the top 5 solutions, because I think a lot of people today are overwhelmed by genetically modified organisms and chemtrails and all the other kinds of questionable things that are going on today and around the globe. But to me, I would like you to begin with my top one, which would be water. And could you give us insight into perhaps for the home and also for drinking water and also for the swimming pool? Can you help us out and address what is the best solution for water?
Sure. And as far as the top 5 goes, I would say really there's 4 things in general that I tell people that are necessary for maintaining health or improving health. One is detoxification. The other is nutrifying the body, getting nutrients in that the cells can metabolize. Doing emotional clearing and reprogramming of unconscious beliefs that sabotage you or don't serve you well. And then educating yourself into a new way of being, because ultimately what got you to where you are is all of your beliefs and feelings up to this point. And so in order to change a condition with your physical body or emotional state, mental state, you've got to change who you are. And that means an identity change, not just take a few supplements and call me in the morning. So water is definitely a very important part of that. part of the detoxification process, really, and the hydration process of the body. And water is heavily misunderstood by people. Water, everyone that deals with water purification systems, with a very few exceptions, looks at water as just chemistry. But water is far, far more than just chemistry. It's also homeopathy, which means that water molecules, when they are exposed to fields, including human consciousness, very weak fields like scalar energy from human consciousness or other types of fields, electromagnetic fields, whether water is exposed to chemicals or materials such as plastic plumbing or metal plumbing or lead in plumbing, or chemicals in water treatment, pressurization, heat, filtration of certain types, all of those damage water homeopathically. And what that means is that when it goes through these processes, water molecules, if they are exposed to natural processes that make water beneficial for human beings, the water molecules will cluster together and create patterns that, when ingested, will convey information to the body, and that will trigger a healing response. But if you're doing unnatural processes to water that can damage it homeopathically, then the water molecules will cluster into patterns that will convey information that will trigger disease responses in the body. So it's very crucial what you do with water. And unfortunately, nobody understands the natural processes that water goes through, with a very few exceptions. So, for example, water goes through the hydrological cycle of the earth. It's evaporated and goes up into the sky. It's bombarded by solar radiation, cosmic radiation, the cycles of the sun and the moon, thunder, lightning, scalar energy, neutrino energy that passes through everything. It's exposed to a lot of different types of energy, and then condenses down, comes back onto the earth, and can land and fall through soil. When it goes through soil, it will, if it's healthy soil, it will pass through minerals that are full of soil that's full of microbes, and the microbes eat minerals and break them down into small particle sizes, including extremely small particles that are individual atoms of certain metals, known as monoatomic elements, also known as Ormus elements, or orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements. And those Ormus elements, they are superconductors, they're extremely regenerative, they have a lot of really weird properties, and they're anti-gravitational. And so going through soil, water will pick up those minerals, and as they pick up more and more of those minerals, they're locked into the soil. But the Ormus elements, because they're anti-gravitational, want to levitate the water to the surface. And so in general, the rains will push those waters down into the soil until they've accumulated enough of these anti-gravitational elements that they will hit aquifers and levitate back up to the surface at spring heads. And so water at a spring head is going to be water that's gone through the full hydrological cycle, has been exposed to a lot of different kinds of energies that will pattern it homeopathically and make it very beneficial. And it will also pick up these superconducting Ormus minerals that make it extremely regenerative to the body. So if you don't mimic that process fairly accurately, then you're not going to get healthy water. And that's the problem that we have on this planet with water systems. It's nobody addresses these monoatomic elements, getting them back into the water. Nobody understands vortexing of water, which is another thing that occurs when water comes down to the surface. It lands in stream and river beds. It flows over rocks, which are crystals, which emanate scalar energies, and not woo-woo, new age types of energies, but true, real energy, scalar energies, and other types of energies that impart frequencies into the water. The vortexing itself will create scalar wave vortexes that will also structure the water and make it very beneficial. Also, when water comes down from the sky and it passes over plants, plants are antennas that reach up into the sky like antennas, and they absorb frequencies into their structures and into the water of their structures. And then they also reach down into the ground with their roots, which are also antennas that, along with picking up chemistry, also picks up energies from the earth and mixes that into their structure. So when rainwater passes over plants and over roots and leaf systems, water picks up a lot of those energies and chemistry as it's passing through all of that. So there's this very, very complex chemistry and energetic that reaches into the subatomic levels of water. And that is not being addressed, and it's certainly not being mimicked in most water systems. There are very few handful of water systems, such as the Miracle water system from Arizona and a couple of other more esoteric systems that do vortex water and do mineralize the water in these ways and add the ormus in. But in general, nobody is doing that. Nobody's even has a clue about that.
So what is your recommendation, when you think about water, we're 75-80% water ourselves, and we need highly energized living water. What do you recommend for the household and when you're traveling?
Well, it depends on what your water source is. If you're on city water, I used to tell people there's really nothing you can do to that water to make it drinkable. However, now, thanks to the Miracle water system, you can buy a system for drinking water that makes it drinkable. And it makes it not only drinkable, it makes it extremely regenerative and healing. That system is about $2,000, I believe, and it looks kind of like a reverse osmosis system. You put it under your kitchen counter, and just like a reverse osmosis system, you have a little faucet that dispenses that water. People have been known to heal serious disease like cancer just by drinking that water. So it's extremely regenerative. So if you can afford a couple $1,000, that is the ideal solution. If you can't afford that, then what I recommend is buying spring water, bottled spring water, or getting spring water if you're near a spring where you can collect it. And ideally get it in glass bottles. If you can't get it in glass, get it in plastic. And then use a water ionizer, and not just any old water ionizer, but a batch type ionizer where you can put the water into a container and ionize it to make it alkaline to whatever degree you desire. And then put that into a large ceramic crock and put some ceramics into it that will clear it homeopathically and absorb any toxins from the plastics. Specifically, if you go to Terraganics.com, Terraganix.com, they have what are called K-type and S-type ceramic pipes that will structure the water homeopathically and absorb chemical toxins. So if you start with spring water, you alkalize it, bring the pH up to about 9.5, and then and that's assuming that you've got spring water that doesn't have too much hardness in it, which most don't. You can have reasonably good water that will sustain you and keep you healthy.
The one machine that's 2,000. Can you please? How do you spell that?
It's MIRACULE water.com. Miraculewater.com is their website. Their website is not very easy to comprehend. There's a lot of text, and it's not very easy to understand what's going on. But I can tell you basically what that machine does, which is really brilliant, is it vortexes water through 3 vortexes using some pipes that were originally designed by a man named Victor Schauberger, who was an absolute genius with water and free energy and all kinds of stuff. And these pipes, they look kind of like a tornado where you have like 5 or 6 of them, and they spiral down from a large opening down to a small opening, and the cross section of each pipe looks like the cross section of an antelope horn, which has very specific sacred geometry that imparts scalar energy into the water. And so when they vortex it like that, and they embed all of that into a material some people call organite, which creates scalar fields, which are just high frequency energy. It's kind of akin to human consciousness, and that energy will restructure the water and make it more hydrating. And they also use magnetics in that material, so that as it's vortexing through magnetic fields, that will release the ormus minerals in the water. And of course, they use conventional filtration and stuff before they do this. So basically, they clean the water chemically, and then they vortex it through scalar fields and magnetic fields. And that's how nature creates this high ormus natural water that's very healing. brilliant system. The man that developed it, I forget his name, Ron somebody, but he was assassinated for developing water fuel technology and I think other free energy technology. So he's a very brilliant man, and he understood Ormus, and very few people get that.
Do you have this machine, the mirror? What is it called again? The mirror what?
Miracule.
Okay, well, and how do you spell that one more time slowly?
Miracule. Miraculewater.com.
Thank you. And do you have one of those?
I do not have one yet. I spent about $12,000 on my own system that I built, which is sufficient, but it's not as good as that. And I've been spending all of my money developing a device that clears chemtrails and nuclear fallout out of the sky for a 75-mile radius. So that's been taking all of my resources. But I'm talking to the Miracule people about the possibility of testing their machine. And actually, I've had water from it on several occasions, so I know, what it's like. But I'd like to get the equipment myself and test it and use it, and maybe even sell it.
Have you tried the water yourself? I mean, have you sampled it?
I have. I was in a couple of different times. I was in Austin, Texas at a natural health center called the New Earth Center, and they're very cutting edge. They used to work with Gabriel Cousins, who's also very cutting edge, and they had a machine like this that I was drinking the water and eating a completely raw, living vegan diet while I was there, and I do that at home, by the way. So I tend to stay cleaned out and detoxed. But when I drank that water, when I woke up in the morning, my urine was very dark, and that's very unusual because I do regular cleansing, so I shouldn't have a lot of stuff coming out. But that stuff detoxed me at a very deep level, and yet I had no fatigue or cleanse reactions. As a matter of fact, the opposite. I felt very energized. So it alkalized my body very deeply. Then the next day, I had to fly out, and I was flying all across the country the next day, and had to eat cooked food the entire day, which was very acidifying. And normally, the next day I'd check my pH, and my urine pH and saliva pH would be acid. But before I left, I had a 16-ounce bottle of that water, and then I got on the plane, ate acid food all day. The next day, when I tested my urine pH, it was around 9, which is like shockingly alkaline. So that one bottle of water was able to keep me alkaline through all of the acid foods that I ate for an entire day. So it's really amazing water.
That is quite impressive testimonial on that. And then also to finish it off with water, can you address swimming pools? Because the reason why I don't go to public swimming pools is because they chlorinate it, and it's awful as far as breathing it and also for the skin. Can you comment on what a practical solution would be for swimming pools?
Yeah, there are actually swimming pool systems that do not use chlorine. For example, there's colloidal silver and copper generators that you can get that will clean swimming pools and disinfect them. There are also salt-based systems where they convert the salt into chlorine and then convert it back into salt. So for a short time, it has chlorine in the water, but not what you swim in. And so those systems are practical systems that you can get. I don't have any brand names, but I can tell you that Hippocrates Health Institute uses them at their pools and spas, and they work beautifully. They don't have to put chlorine in their water. Public facilities like that very often are required by law to use chlorine in their water, even if it's not necessary. So I don't know if they're being mandated to put chlorine in their pools. I don't think they are. But you can completely go without chlorine. Also, using hydrogen peroxide systems. For example, my water system, I'm on a well, and I disinfect my water with hydrogen peroxide. And it just injects it into the water just like a chlorine pump would, except at a different rate, a much, much lower rate. And since it's oxygen, it's actually healthy for you. And so there are always options. And this is something that I say repeatedly in my talks and my workshops, that when you understand how matter and energy work in the universe, the polarities of energy that create these problems that we have, simultaneously these solutions are being created because there are always opposite polarities of energy. And so all you have to do these days is look for the solution and you'll find them. Whatever the problem is, whether it's nuclear fallout or chemtrails or poisoned water or food or whatever, there are solutions out there. And I've worked with people who have solutions for all of this stuff. So, people just need to know to ask the question. Most people don't even know to ask the question or to seek the answer. People pay me $100 an hour to get answers to their questions that they could get in 5 minutes on Google if they would just spend a little bit of time looking. But most people are not conditioned to think for themselves and to take personal responsibility.
Well, let's go over some of those concerns and questions. Number one would be detox, and let's make this very practical and real. If you look at Fukushima, I don't believe that we're being told the total situation and the truth over there. Now, California apparently is getting a lot of the radiation too. And I would like you to give us insight on how to best detox in general, and also if you could address the radiation too.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're not being told the truth at all about the radiation. It's far, far worse than the media is letting on. And in fact, I remember reading a report from the Japan Meteorological Research Institute, which is like their EPA, stating in the first 2 months of that accident that there was 13.5 quadrillion becquerels of radiation dumped into the ocean alone. That's 13.5 million becquerels of radiation in the first 2 months. And so what did they and the US EPA and Canada's Health Canada do? Did they increase the monitoring? No, they stopped monitoring entirely. So it was obviously designed to be suppressed and obfuscated so that people would not know how bad it was. There are people in the know, nuclear physicists and scientists who are working over there. For example, Arnie Gunderson stating that there are massive amounts of radiation, not just in Japan, but globally. And we already are seeing it in the U.S., definitely on the West Coast, but also all across the U.S., not just the West Coast. St. Louis has had hundreds of times more nuclear fallout documented in their rain. The water supplies in Pennsylvania, very high in cadmium and certain nuclear fallout. It's affecting all of us, and it's been attributed to, for example, a 48% increase in infant mortality in Pennsylvania. So it's most definitely having a serious impact on us. We are not being told anything about the degree that it is, and yet again, there are solutions for this. When the accident first happened, the first thing that I did was go online to see if anybody had solutions for it. And as it turns out, there are lots of people that have solutions for it, and they're homemade. If you go online and you Google Cloud Buster or Chemtrail Buster, you will see people showing how to make these scalar energy devices that you can build with materials from Home Depot and eBay and stick them out in your yard, and it will create a scalar wave vortex in your yard that will pull these nuclear materials and air pollution and chemtrail heavy metals into space. It'll create a scalar wave vortex like an upside down tornado that gets stronger as it goes away from the source and pulls these materials up into space. And an individual can clear an area of 20, 30 mile diameter that way.
Allow me to interject for a moment, Ken. I read on the internet, forgive me, I don't know the source, so take it as you may, one account of an individual doing just that with like a Oregon, kind of like Chem Buster, they call it.
Right.
And within 5 to 10 minutes, there was a helicopter hovering over that area. So evidently, what the article brought out of this account is that the folks that were doing the chem busting, apparently there's a signature, a scalar wave, if you will, that kind of tells whoever these people are that are spraying the skies with the geoengineering. It tells them that, hey, somebody's trying to clear out the gunk up there with the spraying. Can you please comment on that?
Yeah, in my experience, because I've made these devices and I've made powered devices that are much, much stronger, I haven't seen any evidence that they can detect the scalar waves. I mean, I'm sure that there are some government agencies that can probably do that, but the problem is that they're not looking for scalar signature device or scalar device signatures. Our country and other countries are at war with each other using these devices like HARP and others that generate scalar activity, and so they're doing weather manipulation against each other and that kind of stuff. It's more likely that they would notice the lack of chemtrail activity in the clear skies and the normal clouds and that kind of stuff. But in my experience so far, the only people that I've seen that were surveilled like that were people that were very public about it. And so I don't think it's necessarily that they're picking up scalar signatures. I think it's more that the people, like, for example, Don Croft, who developed the Chem Buster, he's been messed with because he's been very vocal and public about it. But there are thousands of people. As a matter of fact, I know quite a few people around the U.S. who have built these devices and have scattered them around coastlines and different states, and not only are clearing chemtrails, but normalizing the weather and protecting against tornadoes and hurricanes and severe weather. That most definitely is going on.
So for those folks that are like me, you look at the skies nowadays and you realize the difference between a chemtrail and a contrail, and you see this just basically a sunscreen, if you will. By the afternoon, it's just a bunch of haze. What you're saying, for the record, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there is hope. There is hope that there are a lot of folks out there that are counteracting what's going on.
Well, absolutely. There's always hope because, like I say, if you understand that the energies that create these problems, opposite polarities, are simultaneously creating the solutions always. I have seen personally, I have witnessed technologies that can take care of chemtrails, radiation, neutralize radioactive materials. I've witnessed that firsthand. You can just Google this. Google neutralize radiation or neutralized nuclear radiation. You will see there are seven or eight different technologies that can do that. I witnessed one back in the early 90s from a man named Ewell Brown, who was assassinated, who developed water fuel technology, and it would burn a flame that looked like a blue, like a propane type flame, but it had very, very weird quantum properties, and it would melt things at the subatomic level. So you could take nuclear waste or any nuclear material and burn it with this device, and it would alter it at the subatomic level and rearrange the atoms and turn it into something non-radioactive. So all of these problems have solutions. It's up to us to find them and use them and save ourselves. If you're going to wait around and think that the Mayans in 2012 or ETs or whoever are going to save us, they're not. It's got to be you saving your own butt. I mean, that's why I came up with this stuff that I've come up with, because I immediately, when I saw what happened in Fukushima, the first thing I did was spend several $1,000s on sprouting seeds and food before, the harvest that was contaminated. And then the next thing I did was start looking for the solutions, and I found there's a lot of people out there with the solutions, and there are solutions that you can make inexpensively yourself.
Can you give us one example, please?
Well, like I just said, the chemtrail buster is one thing. That will knock this stuff out of the sky and shoot it up into space so it doesn't come back down on your property. Then for your property itself, if it's already got this junk on it, you can use microbes such as effective microorganisms, which I sell on my website. It's like $22 a quart. You can mix 1 part of that to 500 parts of water and spray it on your plants and your land, and those microbes will eat toxic elements and break them down into non-toxic elements. That's what microbes and parasites and fungus and molds jobs are, to break toxins down into non-toxic elements. Then within your own body, you can ingest zeolites, which are a mineral that will pull the heavy metals and the radiation out of the body. So, and if you're eating a regenerative, mostly live vegan diet with a lot of fluids, a lot of juices, and a lot of natural water, natural living water, then you're going to be continually detoxifying yourself on a daily basis. So you can, not only protect yourself, you can turn yourself around and feel better than you ever have in your life. but you got to take personal responsibility and you have to do it. You have to learn about it. You have to learn a new way of being. And that's really what I see going on, is that there's this dichotomy going on where people are having to choose either a path of enlightenment and abundance and freedom and upliftment, or one of hanging on to the old paradigm and of disempowerment and death and destruction and misery. So it's a personal choice.
Well, let's move on to nutrients. And, when you think about superfoods, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically superfoods is a fancy way of saying that they're nutritionally dense food.
Right.
Now, for those that are listening and they perhaps may be new to that buzz term superfoods, can you comment or give tips to some of the best nutritionally dense food out there, Ken?
Yes, and also, you can grow your own superfoods and you can ferment your own superfoods.